to Pain in the Podcast, your place to find out everything you ever want to know about pain. My name is Don Wichesoria, and I'm joined by the fantastic Dr. Joe Parsons and the charismatic Dr. Joshua Craw. And today we're going to be talking about the management of pain through history, part 2. Welcome in.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 2 of Pain in the Podcast. As with every week, we're going to start by telling you one fact about ourselves and then something that we've learnt about ourselves. Josh, would you like to start this week?
Yeah, sure. So, fact about me is I'm actually quite a talented darts player.
This is true. It's been confirmed.
Yeah.
I went to see him play at the Newcastle University competition. I watched him.
Yeah.
It was very good.
I didn't play very well on that particular night, but other than that, I'm pretty
But
good.
he is. I'm going to add a fact about Josh. Josh was part of the team that won the University National Darts Championship back in 2017.
Oh, that is a good question.
17 or 18?
Could have been 16.
Really?
I think it was 16, yeah.
Wow.
A tail end of 16.
Oh my god, how old am I?
You're very old.
And just for the viewers there, do you know when you just have a realisation of how many years have passed and you have an existential crisis?
Josh has just learned that he is very old.
That is happening right
That's
now.
what he's learned about himself.
Yes.
I am having an existential crisis right now. Fantastic. Joe, what have you learned this week? What's the fact about you?
So my fact is that I have a PhD in breast cancer research, la-dee-da. But the reason I say it is because it means I get to use the title doctor, and it makes a big difference into how I'm treated as a patient.
Mm-hmm.
Get a lot more respect from clinicians, get a lot more honest communication, get people not trying to kind of fob me off as much.
And do you know what? I do the exact opposite. If I'm a patient, I absolutely hate mentioning I'm a doctor or bringing it up.
Interesting.
Okay,
What?
but as a clinician... But no, sorry, yes. Go explain why.
So you get treated differently. So like as a patient, I want the doctor to do a thorough examination, for a history, not use shorthands, explain things to me. Because at the end of the day, if I'm the patient, I'm the patient.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to they're treating me, and they need to give me a full explanation of what I'm expecting. I mean, I know quite a bit about what to expect in a lot of circumstances, but it's not necessarily correct.
So because you've got, I guess, both perspectives, how do you treat other doctors if they do come to you?
Just as I would any other patient.
So you don't feel any pressure to just be a bit more cohesive, or, I don't know, just treat them any differently?
More like transparent with what you're doing, like super, like saying exactly what you've done and really explain the details.
Yeah,
or
I'd probably be like, do you want me to talk through the actual numbers, or would you rather me just tell you what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Don?
Random question. Percentage-wise, like how many of your patients do you think are doctors or announce that they're doctors?
Do you mean medical doctors?
Yes.
Less than one?
Less than one.
Yeah. It's going to be just the population, right? Isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's population. It's a standard there.
Just a random question.
Yeah. Don, fact about you,
what
please.
is my fact about myself? So one fact about myself is that I did a very unrelated undergrad to what I'm currently doing.
Okay.
I studied electronic and electrical engineering
Oh, gosh.
for my undergrad. It was terrible. And so had a bit of a crisis, and then that's when I figured out that psychology is a better route for me. So now and then I studied a psychology and education conversion masters. And I'm very happy with that decision.
Fun. Yeah.
Nice.
Joe, would you like to tell us what you've learned about yourself this week?
I was expecting you to go to Josh and thought I'd have a little bit more time, but here we go.
I mean, I'll tell you, I'll jump on the sword.
You'll
here.
save
yeah.
me, thank you.
Yeah, so this is actually linked into my fact. So I said I'm a great darts player, but in fact, yesterday I found out that darts prowess converts into throwing lemons.
Yes.
So
we were there to witness this.
yeah. So we was at a party, and I somehow had a lemon, and
It was a Halloween party,
Yeah,
and someone was dressed as Life, and they were giving out lemons.
Yeah. So that person's girlfriend then asked me to throw a lemon at them, just for the fun of it. It's a lemon. It's quite a soft.
Josh would
fruit.
have thrown it regardless if anyone asked him or not.
Oh yeah, he's getting thrown. But I managed to get a precision strike in the centre of the forehead.
And it bounced off and hit me in the face as well.
Yeah,
and it was
sorry.
hard when it hit me,
Just
so I tried to
collateral
think
damage.
how hard it was when it hit him.
I'm not usually assaulting my friends with lemons.
No, it's usually much tougher,
Yeah,
heavier
bricks, crowbars, Thank you for falling on the sword there, Josh.
Yeah, it's okay.
Would you like me to
No,
go?
I'll tell you what I've learned about myself this week. I learned both about myself and probably about both of you as well. Is that both me and humans generally have fucking massive lungs.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Huge. I'm currently converting to be a physiotherapist, and I learned that your lungs start above your collarbone. They're 2.5 centimeters above your. They're huge.
Oh, did they just wrap around?
No, they
Yeah.
just go right up to the top. So I was your trachea and splits off into the bronchi, and the bronchi go down here, but your actual lung is all the way around here.
Yeah, so one of the things you have to look for, if somebody gets, for example, if somebody comes into the emergency room and they've been stabbed in the shoulder,
Yeah.
you have to get a chest x-ray to look for a pneumothorax, which is where you might have pierced the lung or you've introduced oxygen into the lung and collapsed the lung.
Wow.
Yeah, because the lungs are massive.
So there you go. I learned that because we were doing surface marking. So you have to learn different landmarks on the body and then be able to use them to estimate where the lungs are.
Whoa, Joe, that's 2 things you've learned this week. Next week, you don't get to learn anything.
Goes in the what I've learned this week. Thank jar. What have I learned about myself this week? I've learned that I get incredibly bored in traffic jams, and surprisingly, I don't really know how, but I spend a weird amount of time in my car, just driving around places.
You do.
Places to be, people to see. So because I spend a lot of time in traffic jams, I like to keep myself entertained, and sometimes a brilliant podcast such as this just isn't enough.
What?
No, it's not enough, Doc.
It's always enough.
It's brilliant. Keep listening. And so I like to entertain myself with different things, such as
Oh, God. What?
a friend got me a little miniature version of my car that I keep inside my car, and that it's one of those wind-up toys. So I just
where you pull it back.
you pull it back and just release it on the dash. And then I also have some bubbles in my car, and so I just go to town on some bubbles when I'm stuck in traffic.
Nice.
And
Do you blow them inside the car or do you open the window?
A bit of both. It depends what the situation is. If there's a lot of traffic and everyone's just very close by, I tend to do it inside the car because I'm too nervous.
You're nervous of aggressively bubbling at someone.
Yes. But there was one occasion where I was bubbling out the window, and this woman behind me just looked incredibly infuriated that I was blowing bubbles out the window in a traffic jam. And I just thought that was hilarious.
Are you forever blowing bubbles?
Am
Three
I
bubbles in the air.
It's the West Ham song, the chant from West Ham. That's a very... For those of you who don't like football, I don't think any of us here... Well, Josh likes football.
Yeah.
But Don and I don't really care. But I've got a lot of niche football knowledge pre-2004 because I was super into it as a little kid.
Great save,
Paluca. Great save, Paluca. If you want to know about early Manchester United, early 2000s Manchester United, I was a big expert about that.
Okay.
There you go. Completely useless. I've given another fact about
It's
myself.
another fact. We're just giving it away for free.
So, usually we finish the episode with this feature, but Josh, do you want to do the theme?
Ancient Egyptian laxative of the week.
And this week, it's sedges.
Sedge. Is this
Joe,
like-
what are sedges?
It sounds like hedge, but
It's like a hedge of the sea. It's
Oh,
like a
no.
waterside hedge. You know the really sharp grass
Oh,
that goes in
God.
those big bushes by the sea?
By swamps and stuff.
Yes, swamp grass.
Swamp
We've
grass.
mentioned swamps twice already on this podcast.
Have.
Can you guess how you consume the sedges?
I hope. Oh, well.
Boil them, mash them, put them in a stew.
That
Nope.
was not specified, but as with most of these ancient Egyptian things, it was inserted rectally.
Is it just shoving it way up in your butt, Morty?
That's very, very painful.
Wow.
They're
To be
quite
fair,
rough.
They're quite rough, but I imagine if you turn it into a tiny
Spiky.
lasso, you could kind of pull the poo out.
Why don't they just make a tincture?
What's a tincture?
Oh, so it's like you grind everything up, you make it into a little paste.
Oh, and
Oh,
you just
yeah.
solidify that and just...
No, you don't solidify it. It's just paste. It's just
Right,
you
okay.
push it up. I suppose.
Well,
What do you use to push it up?
You got fingers.
Okay. I was expecting a butter knife or something.
Yeah, the Egyptians, the famous inventors of the butter knife.
A bit more civilized. Okay, so With today being part 2 of this episode of management of pain throughout history, we finished last week with some very sensible things like Mr. Muhammad ibn Zachariah al-Razi, also known as Big Razes. Sans the Big.
Big Razes.
Being the first person to use inhaled anaesthesia like we do today.
Oh, that's so cool.
All the way back in the 9th century. So we've left you with a good game about 18th century insults that I think you might want to listen to if you've not heard that already. And we'll be continuing the theme in this podcast, giving you equal doses of useful education and absolute chaos.
We say useful education. Perhaps we should, move to somewhere a bit more sensible than what we ended on.
I think insulting women until they pass out is probably not a good position to end the last podcast. So
Yeah.
let's move to something.
Context is needed.
Yeah.
Please listen to it.
Please listen to part 1 of this episode. We're not just...
If you started on part 2, then you're just weird.
Yeah, I mean...
we're just weird to you.
Yeah, you're living life on the seams.
Yeah, cool. How can we
Okay,
be more
then.
sensible?
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to, talk a bit about pharmacology in the management of pain.
Okay.
I think, and I'm sure that all of our listeners are aware that drugs, medications are an absolute mainstay in the management of both acute and chronic pain.
Yeah.
If we think in more contemporary, so in today's times, there's the World Health Organization, which have somewhat outdated now, but the pain ladder, which has 3 rungs on it. You've got step 1, which is mild pain. So treat that with things like paracetamol, ibuprofen.
You kind of over-the-counter kind of stuff.
Yeah, those things that, you don't want to bother your doctor for. You try it for a few days to see if it's going to fix you. Step 2, for what they consider to be moderate pain, you start to think of like weak opioids. And what I mean about that is things like codeine, we've got tramadol along those lines, slightly different, but tramadol. And
Cocodamol as well, I guess.
Yeah, cocodamol, yeah. Well, I mean, you can add step 1, step 2, so like cocodamol is a good sort of...
the mixture of both.
Junction of those. And then we get to step 3, where things start to get a bit more saucy.
Spicy.
Well, maybe not for the patients, because it means you're in pretty severe pain if you happen to get to step 3.
Yeah.
So you're using opioids, so that's effectively morphine, fentanyl, things like.
Yeah. We had a conversation the other day, actually, Josh, didn't we? We were talking about the WHO pain ladder, the World Health Organization pain ladder. And I was saying that I know that a while ago it kind of got taken out of the recommendations for chronic pain. It's really mainly used for acute pain. But you said to me that actually a lot of people on the wards are still using this for anyone that comes in with pain.
Oh, pretty much, yeah. I mean, I think we've got an episode coming up where we'll talk about clinicians' education.
Yeah.
But just as a little snippet into that is that the pain education particularly in British medical schools, it just isn't adequate.
No.
So we're using simplified things like we'll use the World Health Organization pain ladder, and that, for some people that might be the extent of the formal teaching on pain.
Yeah.
Which is quite scary when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. But in that pain ladder, you've got those kind of weaker end drugs, and I believe one of those is aspirin, right?
Yeah.
And so aspirin is a drug that we've actually known about the active ingredient for thousands of years. So aspirin is a type of drug called a salicylate, and the main ingredient is salicylic acid. And so in ancient South American cultures, they'd actually chew up the bark of this tree called the cinchona tree, because it contained salicylic acid. So when people had headaches, when people had pain, like in their muscles, they would chew this bark.
Oh, yeah, so actually, I've done this before when I was a kid, is getting a bit of willow bark and chewing it, and it does actually taste like aspirin.
Wow.
It still does. It's in a lot smaller concentrations, but it does get that bitter taste.
How many trees did you try? Did you just eat all the trees, or did you know about willow?
No, I knew about willow.
Okay.
So I used to go fishing with my dad, and I used to quite like making my own rods.
Okay.
Doing it really basic fishing. And willow is very pliable, so it makes an excellent material for makeshift rods. So you'd strip the bark, and then you'd have the juice of the bark on your hands, and at some point you'd put your hand near your mouth, and then bam, you'd taste the aspirin.
How interesting.
There's actually a common myth about who kind of discovered the effects of salicylates. It was known that Reverend Edward Stone was the one to discover the effects of it, but in actuality, he just kind of seemed to rediscover it by, for some reason, chewing on the willow bark, as Josh has said, is quite a yummy thing to do.
It's absolutely, it tastes vile.
Was he a fisherman, or was he just tasting the trees?
Who knows?
We have no idea.
Maybe you just had a penchant for going around chewing on bark.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you did. What
Yeah.
does it taste like? Do you remember?
Aspirin.
Just aspirin.
Just bitter.
Yeah, it's just bitter, tastes like
Bitter,
aspirin.
bitter. Yeah. So that's kind of the very light side of the medicines that we've got nowadays, in kind of the lower end of the spectrum. But almost all sort of ancient cultures used opium. Like, we've known about the healing powers of the poppy, the pain-killing powers of the poppy for a long, long time. And actually, one of the first places it was used was as a treatment for extreme pain and eye swellings in ancient Greek athletes.
Ooh.
So I don't know whether they were fighters. I don't know why they had extreme pain and eye swelling, but it just...
what else did they do back in the day?
Good point.
Okay.
But that was a mix between opium, cannabinoids, and crocus.
My.
What a
And
trifecta.
crocus contains alkaloids and saponins, which apparently also can be sort of psychoactive and pain-killing. So they would just, like, I don't know, they'd put it on, rub it on, and apparently it would help.
Wow, yeah,
So
I
there
mean,
you go.
you bring up the use of opioids in past civilizations. I mean, if you look at the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, all of them used opioids. I mean,
Yeah.
typically called it opium, didn't we?
Yeah.
Back then. It's derived from the poppy plants, and I mean, we still use it today.
Yeah.
I believe it was Thomas Sydenham. He's a 17th century London physician, and what he said about opium was, opium is necessary and instrumental in the hand of a skilled man, that medicine would be a cripple without it, and whoever understands it will be able to do more with that alone than with any other single medication. So like, he really appreciated that actually this, well, thinking about it, 1700s, this is effectively the drug that we use that actually works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wise words indeed. And if we actually look back at Sydenham, he was actually quite influential. He was a really big detractor from balancing the four humours. So if you go back to part one, we didn't actually mention about like bloodletting and what have you. But balancing the four humours, for the people that don't know, is an old sort of method of thinking that we had to balance the body to treat any ailment. The four humours being blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile.
Okay.
So,
What are the two different coloured biles?
well, one is yellow and one is black.
I figured that out. Basically.
Sorry for the glib response. Do you know, I'm not actually 100% sure. For me, bile's more greeny coloured.
Yeah. I guess
Okay.
the yellow bile is green bile and black bile is the stuff in the bottom of your stomach.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
But they're both from the stomach.
I don't know. Yeah, is yellow bile like the acid? Just like the normal acid, and the black bile's the shit at the bottom of your stomach?
I'll tell you what we can do. We can have a look at it and we can post it in the notes for people at home to have a look on when we move on.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, but he was a real detractor from the balancing of the four humours. What he actually suggested and was a real proponent of was making a diagnosis before we actually start treating people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before that, it was just a case of, I've got a patient, bloodlet, make them snot all over the place, they'll be fine. No. Thomas Sydenham was like, well, he's coming and his knee is in a weird position and he's hobbling. Perhaps he's got something wrong with his knee. You know, okay then, maybe it's more appropriate to treat that. Do you know, I've got this magic drug, opium. Bam.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting though is like he realised as well that it had to be skillfully used. And even back in ancient Rome, like they recognised that opium was very, very addictive. And we're going to speak later on in future episodes about opiate medications, and we're going to talk about the issues with addiction. But what's really interesting is that because the Romans realised that it was potentially addictive, they would use other drugs first. So Josh mentioned the pain ladder earlier on, and they had a pain ladder of their own. So they would use things called mandrake and henbane,
Ooh, okay.
which Don pointed out to me earlier on in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would use these first and only move to opium if they didn't work.
Although I'm not sure if henbane's in Harry Potter. Is henbane in Harry Potter?
No, it's not.
It's just mandrake, right?
Oh.
Mandrake root. They use it to stop...
Stands don't come after me.
Yeah, like for the Harry Potter fans, we know the mandrake root is used to treat petrification.
Yes.
Mandrake root, or mandragora, as Hermione pointed out. Anyway,
All right, Hermione.
so back to opioids. So opiates have been around for time immemorial, and pharmaceutical companies have realised this and really just jumped on it. And like with the rest of medicine, it's about trying new things, seeing what works, trying to improve it. And big pharmaceutical companies have tried to make, here's a new opioid drug, it's less addictive. We only have to look at the opioid crisis, opioid epidemic in the United States to see that this actually is quite a folly. Like, it absolutely destroys
Oh,
lives.
it's devastating.
Like, don't get me wrong, opioid use in the short term and in specific cases, for example, in cancer patients, is incredibly effective. But I think Joe might be able to back me up on this, but in terms of long-term use of opioids, there's just no good evidence that they're actually effective.
Yeah, it's hard. You have to be very delicate with these things, I think. And there are people who I know personally who are on long-term opiate medication, and without it, they do really struggle. And I think a lot of it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. But if you can avoid getting onto them in the first place, it's much better to do that, because there's a concept known as opioid-induced hyperalgesia, which is basically where your pain gets elevated in response to taking pain meds.
Oh, okay.
So it's like in the same way as if you were to burn your finger every day for the rest of your life, it would hurt less and less over time, probably. Like in some cases it would go up, but in the majority, like you'd numb the nerves, like you kind of kill off all the nerves to the area.
Similar to spicy food.
Yeah, exactly like spicy food. So you can kill off the nerves in your mouth, and you no longer, or you numb them and you don't taste the food that spicy anymore. So that's how this kind of works. It's like a rebound response. So it's like the opiates are really helping, but actually they kind of act so heavily on your natural opioid system that they kind of blunt the response to it. And then you lose that natural painkiller, like we talk about things like endorphins, enkephalins, like these natural opioid chemicals. And we lose the response to them, and actually it makes you more vulnerable to pain in the long term. So a lot of people who are on long-term opiates actually end up worse for it. Their pain gets worse, but they had that initial really positive response, and so you've got this kind of psychological idea that it's helping you, but then there's the physical possibility that it's actually making things worse. So it's really challenging for patients in that position to know what to do. So
sounds like a real double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely is. Absolutely is. We've spoken a lot about opiates, and there was an ancient Greek physician called Dioscorides, and he, I believe, lived in the 2nd century CE, and he made an encyclopedia of 900 plant-based medicines.
Ooh, okay.
And he spoke about what they could be used to treat. So there were 5 things that could be used to treat pain. There was poppies, so
naturally.
Yeah. There was henbane. There was belladonna. Poisonous. Nightshade.
Also poisonous.
And the last one, lettuce.
Not poisonous.
Lettuce. Some crispy lettuce.
I don't know. Well, apparently wild lettuce still has anti-inflammatory properties. There was a big thing in the States a few years back where people were starting to drink lettuce tea. And they were saying how good it made them feel and stuff. So they were like getting wild lettuce, which sounds like a slang term for cannabis, but actual wild lettuce, brewing it up, and it was being used to help people treat their pain. So
wow.
But yeah, I believe, Don, you had a look at how mandrake and henbane, we spoke about that a bit earlier on, like how they actually work. You dug into that a little bit.
So mandrake and henbane, they kind of work by, and I might be completely butchering this, by blocking the acetylcholine.
Yeah, acetylcholine.
Yeah, I think we'd say acetylcholine, but I mean,
acetylcholine, however you want to say it.
That thing, the activity of that in the brain, which is responsible for firing nerve signals, and they're both fairly poisonous in the case of an overdose.
Okay.
But these were combined with opium in a concoction known as the Great Rest in Antidotarium by Nicholas Salerno. And this modern paper worked out that the concentrations at which this would work, and worked out that if you put in double of each drug, it would be completely lethal, and there was just a very small margin for error, with no accurate measuring.
Yeah, I guess it must have been hard at the time, because it's like now we get drugs at however many milligrams, nanograms, grams of drug. But back then it was just like some plant.
Yeah, I suppose it's got a narrow therapeutic window, but if you don't know how to measure that out or calculate it.
Imagine the testing process.
It's impressive they just didn't kill everyone.
Yeah. So there was another paper which suggested that henbane mixed with mastic gum was used to cover up cavities in teeth.
Ooh, mastic gum.
Okay. Mastic gum.
Have you got mastic gum?
We've got a liqueur made from mastic gum that our friend very kindly brought back to us.
Oh, is that the one that smells really bad?
It smells terrible.
It smells like a mix. It's like if pine needles had sex with
licorice.
With licorice, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
But it provided a bit of pain killing. So
yeah,
I think that's probably the alcohol.
True, possibly.
Yeah. Talking about less used, I said drugs, illicit drugs. Illicit drugs haven't always been illegal. For example, cocaine.
Oh yeah.
Widely used in dentistry for dental pain. Well, if you look into the 1980s cop movies where they take some cocaine on the finger, rub it in the teeth, what they're actually checking for is if the gums go numb.
Yeah.
Because it's a very good anaesthetic in terms of numbing. Also, one of my favourite things about cocaine is that it's
just cocaine.
One of my favourite, one of the many things I love about cocaine.
From a pharmacological point of view, GMC, don't come at me, is that it's a really good antitussive. So they used to
what does that mean?
It means stopping you from coughing. So you used to put it into pastils and you used to suck on it and it used to sore throat, stop you coughing.
Oh, wow.
Not only that though, right? This is also one of my favourite facts about the First World War, is heroin. Was an over-the-counter medication.
Really?
Yeah, you could literally just go in, I'd like some, well, I imagine they call it opium back then. I'd like some opium, please. Yep, here you go, that'll be 2 shillings, 6pence, whatever.
Ah, the good old days.
Wait, no. Heroin was the drug name. Heroin was
it was a trade, yeah.
Because it was to make you heroic. It's something in German, because it's made by Bayer? Pharmacies. The people that made aspirin also made heroin.
Ooh, yeah. So then
I didn't know it was over the counter, but
yeah, it was well over the counter.
Wow.
So like the First World War, the soldiers would get given heroin for pain relief.
Oh, I don't know.
They'd get horrifically addicted to heroin, as I'm sure you can imagine. They'd come home and then be able to continue their addiction.
Wow. I do want to point out though, with these kind of strong drugs, and particularly the ones that are now illegal, you've got to think about how these were used back in the day. So back in South American cultures, in ancient South American cultures, coca leaves were really commonly used for pain killing. And on average, it's estimated that people in these kind of ancient cultures, like particularly ones like in the Amazon now, which are still kind of untouched, like where chewing coca leaves is still quite common, they chew between 60 and 370 grams of leaves per day. So that's quite a wide range.
That is a lot, yeah.
That's the grams of leaves, that's not the grams of cocaine.
Yeah,
Because it was about 0.1 to 0.9% weight by weight, which means for every 100 grams of leaves, you get about 0.1 grams of, between 0.1 and 0.9 grams of cocaine. So the maximum dosage they're getting over a 24-hour period is about 200 to 300 milligrams. So still quite a lot of cocaine, don't get me wrong, but not insane amounts. And this converts to a blood concentration of 98 nanograms per litre. So
is that a lot?
I don't actually know, but... Oh, no, actually, no. It's an insane amount, because my notes tell me that if you did a single line of cocaine on the street, that contains about 20 to 50 mgs of cocaine, but you're taking it in so quick, and it's into such an absorbent area through your nose, that instead of being 98 nanograms, like chewing the coca leaves, it gives you a blood cocaine of 4,890 nanograms. So somewhere in the region of 49 times more cocaine in your blood. than if you just chew the coca leaves. So you've got to consider how this was being used. Like the people in these ancient South American civilizations weren't just
Coke fiends.
doing lines. Yeah, exactly. They were.
I mean, they were Coke fiends, but just not.
So is that similar to the beetle leaf? Is it the beetle leaf that has a similar effect?
I don't know if it's pain killing, but I know people do. They chew it a lot. Like
I don't even know what leaf that is. What's that?
I think it's... Is that the one where it makes your like gums bleed?
no, it makes them red. It's like
Makes them
is it-
red.
how you pronounce it? It's like cat. Like
Yes,
there's a
yeah,
noise
yeah,
that I
there
can't
is.
make with the back of my throat, but it's
Yes.
like yeah, I
It's
can't do it.
African.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a.
One of my friends said it's really
yeah.
he's Somalian, and he was saying
Okay.
it's very common in Somalia.
Oh, right.
He said
I think it's common in other parts of the world.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
I'm sure it is. But he was just telling me that he sometimes flies to Djibouti because it's cheaper and then goes across the border. And he was saying that all the taxi drivers from Djibouti to Somalia drive on these like insane roads that are like on a mountain and there's no fence. So like if you crash, like you're going to die. And he's like they're just chewing loads of this like cat, and they're just like it's like Tokyo Drift.
Nice.
But he's alive, so
Wow.
So yeah, good for him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff about cocaine though, right, in South America. Back in the old days, there's something about mummies. What did we find about mummies?
There is. So in northern Chile, there was remains of trace cocaine found in mummies, and apparently it was used for stomach pains, intestinal spasms, nausea, and indigestion amongst the indigenous South American people. And what they did was they just held it in their mouth for painful oral ulcers or toothache.
Okay.
Yeah.
So instead of like Bonjela,
It's just
it was like just
cocaine.
how can you
It's just cocaine.
Just get a tube of liquid cocaine.
Yeah. There was a I spoke about this in the last episode about trepanning, like this idea of drilling holes in the skull to let pressure out, and people used to do this. They're like, got a headache, gonna drill a hole in your skull.
I mean, it's still used today. I mean, not to treat headaches.
That's to treat
Intracranial pressure.
encephalopathy. Is that the word?
So
I'm looking
if
for?
you've got for example, if you've got a brain bleed and extradural hemorrhage, for example,
Yeah.
that's a buildup of blood outside the brain, which puts pressure on the brain and increases the pressure within your skull. Obviously, your skull's an enclosed environment, so it can't correct that, and it can lead to death. So, drilling a hole in your head, releasing that blood, releases the pressure. Still used today in modern medicine.
Well, I'm guessing when they do it nowadays, they do it with local anaesthetic or general anaesthetic.
And a power drill.
Oh, wow. Because back then, what they used to do when they drilled a hole in your head is, so that you didn't get like such bad after effects, like bad inflammation, is they would chew up coca leaves and they'd spit it into the hole.
Oh, fantastic.
Just stuff it down the hole.
Yeah, no, just basically just creating a plug. Just being
Wow.
like, oh, we don't need the hole anymore. And then
How resourceful.
plug it. Yeah, so I guess
Yeah.
that was just like getting... Also, like drugs like that tend to act a lot stronger in your central nervous system. So I guess like having cocaine put directly onto your brain was probably like a pretty good way of painkilling.
Of
dying, yeah.
I mean, your brain doesn't have any pain receptors.
No, but it's got opioid receptors though.
Oh, it does, yeah.
Oh,
Ooh,
yeah.
okay, yeah. That's a really good point. Don't do that at home.
Yeah, please don't do that at home.
Or anywhere.
So I'm guessing these were medical professionals doing these procedures.
I mean, this was in 1000 BCE.
Just
What,
the
what,
Mayans.
what they'd consider medical.
I would assume what they would consider medical professionals, yeah.
Yeah. But apparently there's also some religious professionals? No, just religious people
Professionals?
going around promoting the use of cocaine. There was a Jesuit priest called, and this makes me sad, Don Antonio Julian.
Oh,
Oh,
Don.
it's called Don.
I don't want to share a name with
Don, the
with
cocaine-themed priest.
Back in the 17th century in Spain, who travelled around from Spain to South America suggesting that the Spanish government replace tea and coffee beverages with cocaine.
As a drink? Or
I think.
No, just powder.
So,
No drinks, just powder.
he's coming back just absolutely fucking wired.
This
Like,
is a really good drink.
I've got
Try it.
Guys, I've got such a good idea for you. Speaking at a million miles an hour. Wow, okay,
yeah,
cool.
a hot cup of cocaine.
Oh, come on, darling, sit down. You've had a long day. Have a hot cup of cocaine. So there's actually quite a lot of good literature out there talking about like ancient South American medicines. But there's also quite a lot about ancient North American medicines as well.
Okay.
So there's a really nice article that, again, as with all of them, you find in the show notes, where they talk about this Native American documentation of 2,800 different plants that had medicinal properties. So it's not talking about like 2,800 different conditions that can be treated. It's like each plant and all the conditions it could treat. It's like this incredible piece of literature.
Like a good tome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got these plants in there like hazel and bloodroot, both of which have been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects, like in modern controlled trials. And they were finding these out sort of around 1,000 years ago. So it's really impressive. Wow. And sort of indigenous populations all over the world are really, well, you have to be, because before what we call the invention of modern medicine, before we had this ability to kind of isolate chemicals from the source where we get them, whether we're synthesizing them or getting them from plants, you had to know the botany, you had to know what was around you. And so Aboriginal Australians actually used to chew a plant called patchouli for pain relief. So they would use it for like internal or visceral pain, like gut pain. And it's a psychoactive member of the nicotine family.
Wow.
So like nicotine producing tobacco family. So it, it's like chewing tobacco, but it's also psychoactive. So it kind of sends you somewhere else.
It's also a very pretty flower.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah,
so it
it's,
is. I'd not actually Google pictures
Nice
of it.
little white, almost jasmine-looking flower.
Yeah.
I don't know what jasmine looks like, to be honest.
Well, it looks a bit like that.
Well, apparently it looks like patchouli. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. You know, we spoke a lot about illegal drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to know about LSD?
Of course.
Right. If you let barley, like the grass that you make beer from and stuff, if it gets a fungal infection, it actually sometimes produces these type of chemical called ergots, which are really, really chemically similar to LSD. And so, like, back in ancient European cultures, so like Rome and Greece, people would actually like dissolve this kind of fungusy barley into their wine, into their cheese, into honey, and they would just take that and get spaced.
Get fucked.
Well, we're not giving you advice on how to make LSD.
Oh yeah, it's not just
That
any barley with a fungal
Yeah.
infection, it's a very specific region, so
Wow.
we're not going to tell you what that region is.
Yeah. So I think we're tumbling towards the end of part 2 of this podcast.
Yeah.
And we've talked about a lot of treatments throughout history.
Mm.
One thing that we actually haven't talked about too much now is cauterization.
Josh, what is cauterization?
Well, cauterization, you may ask.
He did.
In modern medicine, cauterization is the use of heat, lasers, electricity to, what we say, cauterize a wound. So that can be to stop bleeding, can be to deaden nerves.
So basically you're just like searing a wound.
Yeah. So like you might see it in an old Robin Hood movie when somebody has a finger chopped off. They get a big hot iron and then
Wow.
really just...
Is it just like to scar it quickly so it stops bleeding?
Yeah, so what you're doing is you're sealing the vessel.
Okay.
You're deadening the end of the nerve. So it has an effect of you're not going to feel it and you're stopping the bleeding. And actually as well, this is a great temperature, so like you're killing bacteria.
Ah,
So
that's really clever,
yeah.
actually.
So apparently, do you know in branding as well?
Yeah.
So
Like branding a cow?
Yeah, branding
Yeah.
a cow. Apparently, the temperature's so hot that after the initial
Like first second.
second, you kill all the nerves, so then you don't feel anything.
Really?
Right.
I assume there's a bit of inflammation though, right?
Apparently, so yeah.
Also,
there has
how
to
did,
be.
how did the cow tell them?
Yeah. Yeah, the cow says it's fine. Let's keep doing it.
That is interesting because that's also how you kind of protect raw meat when you want to make, for example, a beef tartare, which uses raw beef. So you kind of sear it off, sear the outside of it, and just protect it until you have to actually use the inside of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Also, we forget to mention, I'm going to give you bonus facts about each Josh and Don. Both of them have, in past lives, been a chef.
Yes.
So, Josh worked in a kitchen for nearly 7 years. Or more than 7 years? Best part of 7 years.
16 through to 23, yeah.
Yeah, 7 years.
Wow.
And Don has been
not that long.
a pizza chef, and he's worked
He's been a
in
pizza
very
chef.
posh Sri Lankan restaurants in London.
Yeah.
He's a very multi-talented man.
It was a wonderful time.
Is our Donathan.
Thank you.
So, I'm glad you brought up cauterization, because we're kind of thinking about other methods that are a bit more mechanical for managing pain. I just want to touch on acupuncture.
Okay.
Because there's an article that talks about there being evidence of acupuncture as far back as 6000 BCE, right? Now, the one thing the article fails to talk about is what the evidence is. So I don't know if this is like they just found really old needles.
Oh, no.
It's not really very clear, but like it's been around in Chinese medicine for a long, long time, thousands of years. So I don't know if you guys have found anything about acupuncture in your research.
No, but mostly because I didn't do any research for that. But
Yeah,
I
that-
did speak to someone who does quite a bit of acupuncture, and she has found it. She kind of not convinced me, but she just enlightened me about the benefits of it. She said that it was kind of transformational, really, in her pain management.
Really?
Yeah, and yeah, if you guys have anything to say about
I mean, I know that technically, I don't know if it still is, but it was definitely at one point available on the NHS.
that.
You can still, depending on where you are, it's a bit of a postcode lottery,
Okay.
but you can get up to 3 treatments in a lot of places.
Okay.
I know that one of my close friends in Scotland had 3 treatments, and it was amazing for him, but then they were like, yeah, okay, well, shame that helped you, because we're not going to pay for it anymore.
Wow.
Which I understand, and I understand that people are very hesitant to embrace any medicines that aren't kind of very conventional westernized medicine. But actually, as you said in part 1, Josh, of this 2-part episode, if people want to use homeopathy, like, at least they're staying hydrated. And if people want to use acupuncture, like, as long as it's done safely by someone who's not going to puncture your lung
With clean needles.
with clean needles, there's not much harm to be done. So if people get benefit from it, why not? Like, and also things like that don't tend to persist for so long if there's not some genuine benefit.
Yeah.
I think 1,000 years or whatever you just mentioned. I
Yeah.
think that survived the test. Random question. Are the needles disposable?
Random answer. Hedgehog.
I'd say that's quite a related answer, actually.
Yeah, it's very related. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say they probably weren't a few thousand years ago,
Okay.
but I'm going to guess that they're disposable now, because I feel like they'd just be a nightmare to clean because they're so thin.
Well, I mean, I reckon you can clean. I reckon some places will clean them. The reason being is they'll just put them in a solution.
Yeah, they'd put in bleach,
That's what
basically.
a lot of tattoo artists do who reuse
Yeah.
needles.
Hmm.
Good tattoo artists use different needles every time. Just a medical tip for you. If you've got a tattoo artist who reuses needles, find a new tattoo artist.
How do you know if they've reused needle?
Well, they'll open a brand new pack.
I've
You'll
never had a
see them
tattoo.
do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also just want to, we're going completely tangentially.
I love it.
You know, we were talking about sort of different cultures earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
I found an interesting article about Inuits.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Inuits?
Inuits, people who live in the Arctic Circle.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's the official definition, but that is my understanding. Let's do a quick
Yeah, I
Google.
mean, is Inuit still a used term?
I think Inuit is.
Yes.
I think Eskimo is politically incorrect.
Okay.
They are an indigenous people in the northern parts of Canada and Greenland and Alaska.
Okay.
They are one of the 3 branches of the Eskimo Aleut language family with about 60,000 speakers. So they are also known as Inuktitut, which I apologise to anyone who has any relations to people of Inuit descent, because I've butchered that pronunciation, but yes. There's a really cool article about the use of seals.
Ooh, okay.
And you know, I was talking to you about like how people use the resources they've got around them. Like
What
people,
kind of seals?
I don't. That's a great question.
No, I'm...
No, seals as in like the animal.
The
I'm
animal,
like,
okay.
Yeah, not the
Yeah,
singer.
not seal.
There's just
Yeah,
clones.
Heidi Klum is not happy that that seal keeps getting abducted by Inuits. So they used like products from seals to treat like anything. And I don't know if it worked. I'd love to see people do trials on this, because I can't say it doesn't work. I've never tried it. But if people got an ear infection, they would pour warm seal oil into the ear canal and just clear it out, which I imagine would work quite
Yeah.
well. You're
Well-
creating oil, you're creating a seal, you're putting oxygen getting in.
Well, I'm going to tell you, that is actually good advice.
Is it?
Don't do it at home, but if you've got blockage in your ear, let's say you've got earwax all blocked up, the first line treatment that we recommend from the NHS would be olive oil. You don't have to go buy all these fancy sprays, which don't work, by the way, and can cause irritation to the ear, particularly ones that cause, which include hydrogen peroxide. But olive oil, a couple of drops in.
I thought you were talking about the spray olive oil.
I wouldn't use the spray one.
Don't use the spray olive oil.
What you can do is you can get like a bit of tissue, take a couple of drops up, couple of drops of oil in your ear, leave it there for 10 minutes, turn your head. What it does is it absorbs, because it's oil based, it absorbs the wax and softens it all and lets all the gunk come out.
Oh wow!
And then you just tip your head over the other side to let it all out.
Well, you know, you
Or
can do. Or
Just slap the other side of your head. Just bash it out.
I've done it because I sleep with. Another fact about Josh: I sleep with earplugs in. I have done for like the last 10 years, and so I get a lot of wax build up. And yeah,
Wow.
really works.
There you go. Okay, so Inuits 1, Italians 1,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
Josh
sure.
1.
Boom. Oh, does that mean?
Does that put him on the scoreboard?
Does that put me on the
I
scoreboard?
don't think that puts him on the scoreboard.
Worth a try.
So, seal oil into the ear for an ear infection. Raw seal meat and seal oil are used to treat lower GI tract pain, so your gut pain, constipation and diarrhea. I don't understand how it can treat both constipation and diarrhea. That feels quite counterintuitive to treat both, but either way. They would have seal liver boiled and eaten for a headache. And seal blood and liver soup was used to treat nausea or hypothermia. So, again, I would love to know if any of this has any actual kind of medical basis.
I mean, I can't imagine seal blood. Okay, so I've worked on the gastroenterology ward.
Yeah.
Quite often people have upper gastrointestinal bleeds. That's where there's a lot of blood going into your stomach, effectively.
Yeah.
Usually from higher up, from like let's say you've got an ulcer in your throat or something like that. And it causes what we call a blood meal. So you start to digest that blood.
Okay.
Delicious.
That can actually make you very nauseous.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. So
So maybe it cures your nausea by making you so nauseous that you throw up whatever was making you nauseous in the first place.
maybe.
It's like double
They
nausea.
just stop, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So with all these treatments that kind of use animal blood, what is it specifically about that kind of blood that is so beneficial? Is there a certain compound in that's different or unique to certain animals?
I don't know, I guess. Like, this is completely pulling this out my arse. But I'm assuming, like, blood has a lot of good things in it. It's got a lot of iron, it's got a lot of protein, it's got a lot of nutrients. And so I'm assuming that just, like, filling your body with things that you need, like iron and nutrients.
I mean, it is a nutrient-dense food.
Exactly.
Not
So
food, but like...
I'm assuming that just helps your own body and your own immune
Kinda
system fight off the
supplements.
infection. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I assume it's just like eating really, really good food. Like, you know when your mum makes you chicken soup when you're ill? I assume it's just like your mum has brought you some seal blood.
Seal blood soup. I would just recommend not drinking raw blood at home. Just, there's going to be somebody. I did not advise you to eat blood.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think that's a very good... Basically, if there's anything that you've heard during this episode, other than probably acupuncture, we'd say stray far away from it.
Yeah, don't go find some coca leaves, heroin, all that.
Don't even chew a willow tree. It won't do you much harm, but...
You can chew some willow bark, just a small amount. As long as you've seen your doctor first and got advice.
You can try fishing with it.
You could just try fishing.
Just
I
safer
don't think the
option.
fish like willow bark.
Oh, damn. I just want to bring up one last piece of content before we get to the end of the episode. I think I mentioned this briefly in the last episode that I was going to talk about this. So, pain is subjective, right? So, the same stimulus for Josh will cause a different amount of pain to the same stimulus for Don. If they get punched in the arm by the same person at the same position with the same intensity, they're going to have different responses. But there's been a drive throughout history for people to try and find ways to objectify it. So, like, how can we standardise this between people? Now, I'm breaking a big old rule of this episode by jumping way beyond 1800. This is in the 1940s, but it feels very relevant to talk about it now. So, in the 1940s, at Cornell University, there was James Hardy, Harold Wolff, and Helen Goodall, the three doctors. And they were looking to try and quantify levels of pain. And so they found... They said there were 21 levels of pain between threshold pain, so like when you first start to feel pain, and the ceiling of pain. So like your absolute maximum unbearable pain. And they said that each one of these measurements of pain should be called a DOL, as in dollar, like Josh spoke about earlier on.
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
And so these levels of pain were found by using an instrument they called a dolorimeter. Now, a dolorimeter produced a heat stimulus on the skin, so it just burned you, and it burned you more and more intensely, basically.
I'm sorry, is this leading to you saying dollar bills, y'all? Because if not, I'll be very disappointed.
Okay, I want you to... You can finish the story with dollar bills, y'all.
Okay.
But this was tested, right? So they were trying to compare whether childbirth was... Like, where childbirth sat on the scale. So what they did was they went to 19 different women who were in labour, and they burned them with different strength stimulus.
God.
I know, right?
Did they get beaten afterwards?
Wait, so they were saying, how does this pain compare to the pain of your last contraction? So they were trying to work out the average pain of labour,
Okay.
right, compared to this 21-point scale. And the scientific write-up says, one of the patients became so hostile that attempts at further measurements were abandoned, due mainly to unwillingness on the part of the patient to cooperate.
So hysterical, these
You go through
pregnant women.
labour, can I just burn you, please?
But just like, you know, right, all of us here have done some research. We've all had to go through ethics approval, right? We've all had to write proposal for ethic committee, and they've had to say, yes, this is appropriate, no, it's not. How the hell research went on beforehand? Like, it's just cowboy town.
1940s, not even that long ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you'd think, like, oh yeah, we must have some stuff that we've learned, like, from the 1940s science, but yeah, there's some really sketchy stuff.
And everything seems impossible nowadays.
Yeah.
That's
So
wild.
stringent.
Those of you that have kindly stayed and listened to this far, something that you might have noticed that we haven't talked about in the history of pain management is women. We've mentioned briefly, but we do feel that is an area that does need a good, maybe even a good 2-part episode, specifically dedicated to treatment of women throughout history, particularly regarding to pain.
Yeah,
and I think we may need maybe even need a guest for that one as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you will notice is that all three of us are men, and we are well aware that we are not representative of the chronic pain demographic. It's more prevalent in women. We know that it's more prevalent in ethnic minorities, which Josh and I are not here in the UK. And so we recognise that we are not fully representative. And these first few episodes, you're going to hear just us, and we're going to sort of introduce you to this world of pain. To the world of pain. We're going to introduce you to the world of pain. But what we want to do is we want to bring in guests who have lived experience of these different elements, who have a clinical experience of managing pain, and we want to get other voices heard here. So put up with us for the first 3 or 4 episodes, and then you'll start to hear more and more guests appearing on the podcast. And please, comment down below, wherever you're listening to your podcasts. Comment and tell us who you want to see on the podcast. If there's someone who you want to see who's a pain researcher, if you know a doctor that you think is brilliant and you really think they should be on the podcast, or if it's just, I want to see more women on the podcast. I want to see more people who aren't British on the podcast. Yeah. Like, you tell us what you want, and we will do our very, very best to accommodate.
I think it's also quite important to just to let the audience know that moving forward, we are we're not just talking about history of pain. We are talking about a lot of other areas, about more contemporary, about, for example, different types of pain, about different conditions, about how to navigate the NHS and the healthcare system to actually get the treatment that you need and support that you might need.
Yeah, we're going to dive deep into lots of different medications. We're going to talk about loads and loads of different treatment options that are available to you. We're going to do episodes for people who are carers, so that we can help to give you some support there and help to signpost you towards things that can help you. And we're going to just try and educate people as much as we can about predominantly chronic pain, but pain more generally, so that this can be something that's not taboo and not talked about.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Like we said, 23 million people in the UK have chronic pain, and it's something that we barely speak about. So that's what we're here to do, and that's the reason why we ask you, please share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with people in the pain clinic waiting room, share it with the random people at the bus stop, as long as you're being safe.
If you've ever felt that you just kind of feel like you're whining about your pain, we're here to listen. Just comment down whatever what your experiences are, and I'm sure we can all relate to that.
Exactly. And very last but not least, we have our book review. So this week makes a lot of sense. We are talking about a history book.
Okay.
And this is a book called The History of Pain by Roselyne Ray.
Very
Now,
apt.
this book is immensely hard to get hold of. It's also incredibly dense. It was originally written in French and quite poorly translated. There's a lot of amazing information in there. We've used it as a source throughout this episode. She did a wonderful piece of work getting it. The copy I actually bought online was from the 1994 International Association for the Study of Pain conference. I only know that because the leaflet from 1994 for the conference fell out of the book when I opened it.
That is pretty
So obviously
cool.
it's not been read for a long time.
Longer than you guys
nearly
have been
30
alive.
years. Yeah, exactly, longer than we've been alive. So, but it's a really excellent book to help to kind of ground you in historical knowledge about chronic pain. But what you could just do instead, if you want to save yourself the poor translation, is just keep listening to us.
Yeah, that's what I'd do. And if you want to keep listening to us, is there any way you can get more information from us or more content?
I believe there is, Josh.
Yeah.
And I think it's called the Patreon page.
Oh, okay.
Yes, our Patreon will just have a lot of extra content that you might find really funny. You'll learn
might
a lot. You might not. You'll learn a lot more about us, and some things you might not want to learn about us. But there you go. They're all there, and feel free to go visit.
Yeah.
And we just want to say, if anyone ever wants to speak to us, wants to reach out, they want to contact us here on the podcast, we've got a group email. So it's paininthepodcass@gmail.com. So just to specify, paininthepodcass with ass at the end like a donkey, not podcast with a T. paininthepodcass@gmail.com, and you can chat to us about anything we spoke about in the episode. We can help signpost you towards things. We can give you all of our show notes, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just a little caveat to the last one. The only thing that we won't be giving is medical advice.
Absolutely.
I am a qualified doctor, but I'm not your doctor. Best person to talk to is your GP at first instance.
Yeah.
So if you do actually have legitimate medical questions or you need medical help, please do seek appropriate medical care.
Should we be putting that at the start?
Well, it's too late now.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody that's listened so far, and I look forward to you catching up with us again.
Yeah. But yes, I think that wraps it up for this week. It's been a great episode, and
We'll let the audience be the judge of that.
I think it's been a great episode.
It has been an episode.
Well, we all have a few episodes here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for listening, and we shall see you next week.
Thank you, and see you later.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.